started in search of stories hidden beneath gravel. My father shelved from the street to the steps of the house that he would die inside of 30 years later. It started in search of the slow dripping explanations tucked in loosely behind my mother's tongue on why one stays and what wildflower fields are best to scream in. It started in search of paint samples pressed to my cheek. My father saying that he wanted the color of my ocean eyes and flushed ways to remain somewhere in the wall he was preparing to paint. It started out in search of how many lightning bugs it would take to light up my whole street, while whispering mnemonics for a spelling test to get her, and wondering what would happen if they did. It started out in search of a naked body in a mirror attempting to see itself be seen. 10 years old and hoping that in 20 years she will say to whomever is asking, "Would you like to see my favorite spill?" and point to the blotchy birthmark coating her left rib cage. It started out in search of my father's palimpsest hieroglyphics, shyly sponged into the room we lived most often in. 13 color palettes over 4 years of failed attempts, he called them. A languorous ooze of muted browns, violets, and styrofoam creams. Inverted mummification, an ancient frost of blue and rose buried beneath. It started out in search of cool whipped mud beneath my sister's feet after spring rain. The 911 call I made in 2001, saying the red isn't quite as red as I imagined. What would make her? What will become of us, my parents? What does this mean for me? It started out in search of an I loved you then as I do now. Stones stored away in a cat food tin with a story about a tornado licking the shoreline of Lake Erie. It started out in search of being sought out by a poet that uprooted my desire to be anything other than what we could be together. It started out in search of Ben Gibbard's line, "Someday you will be loved." Pressed against the passenger seat, his hand overtop mine. Someday, sitting in this car, unsatisfied with the fawning fog caught in my lungs. It started in search of what the silence was speaking up for, in a parking lot just a few blocks away from our apartment. Him, a dozen poems wrapped in wildflowers, and the reminder of how lucky we are, and yet it started out in search of the spite ofs. It started out in search of not searching, for the firm-breasted corset unbuttoned from my eyes after seeing big-leafed maple trees doused in mossy light. Rilke's prayer to solitude nesting inside of me. It started out in search of the greetings, with a goodbye already boiling over. A dream I woke crying and smiling from. My adventure partner elsewhere, still visiting in the place we always imagined poems decided to take walks in. It started out in search of how to take both trails at the fork. The confluence of stars mapped across now 2 distant worlds. Roads impassable by machine, guided by fuel. It started out in search of cranks, gears, 4 attempts at handlebars, the body seeing itself be seen. A blotchy birthmark, visible now only under Pacific Northwest skies. It started out in search of Skokomish, Dosi Wallops, Hamma Hamma, a fingernail moon just above the vanishing point. A wild whisper calling out their true names. All that goes unseen, no matter how wide-eyed and willing. Today started out with a bow, bristled in winter daylight, and the first words of every day leading up to this day will eventually make up a halfway decent story on how a life could possibly be. What is it that can be held on to? What can be let go? As these pale cheeks and lake green eyes turn lighter and then darker and then light again.
I don't even know what to say. It's so beautiful. It made me cry. It made me laugh. It's absolutely beautiful. I thank you so much. I mean, my goodness. It's just wonderful. It's you. It's you. Thank you so much for sharing. I hope I can talk to you soon. I don't know what you could possibly be finishing. It's absolutely lovely. And so are you. I love you, darling. Bye.